Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of All Things Policy, podcast of the Takshashila institution. And in today's episode, I have with me Harshit Kukreja. Hi Harshit, how are you?
Hi Carl, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So me and Harshit are back to discuss what is, evolving to be a very interesting project by Harshit, and that's Insights from Biology. And in today's episode, I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion, although I'm going to be asking him a lot more questions than the other way around. So, Harshit, so you wanted to talk about a couple of concepts in this episode today, right? So one is a costly information theory, and the other one is a learning biases. So do you want to just give a sort of background to this concept and what we can expect from this episode going forward?
Yeah, sure. So this is sort of a continuation of our attempt to make more people interested in the biology and policy direction we want to take at Takshashila. So in this episode, we'll focus mainly on the costly information theory and learning biases. Costly information theory, basically the funda is that information is costly for a person to acquire. So you want accurate information at the most cost effective way. And to do that, people have developed certain biases, certain cognitive biases, which help them sort of like extract the most accurate information at the most cost effective way. So this is how humans have been evolving, and we have been learning from each other and adapting.
Okay. So, I mean, if you can maybe just set the ball rolling in terms of what this cost information theory comprises of, and like if there are any examples that you can maybe, shed light on this. So, I mean, you can illustrate this with an example and maybe then we can take it from there.
Yeah. Basically, if you make a 2x2, I don't know why nowadays I like making 2x2s a lot. So if you make a 2x2 and you look at the top right quadrant, that is, and on the x-axis, you have cost effectiveness. On the y-axis, you have accuracy. And on the top right quadrant, you have high accuracy and high cost effectiveness. This is the quadrant that we want to be in, because we want to acquire information which is for anything. For instance, if you want to be a good cricket player, you want to learn that by not spending too much energy on that, by not spending too much energy on learning how to be the best cricket player. You want, maybe almost everybody wants to sort of have a cheat book on how to do whatever they want to do and basically emulate others' successes. So this is the old concept which a lot of economists also use, and this is basically a trade-off between procuring information at accurate behavioral information at high cost and less accurate information at low cost. So we aim to be in the topmost quadrant where the information is also sufficiently accurate and as accurate as possible, and the cost is also not that much. So to do all this, we have learned certain cultural or cognitive biases that are allowing us to acquire useful traits from other people at a lower cost, hence avoiding the costly process of getting the information. So this is the crux of the theory. This is how we have been functioning, and I think it will become more clear as we talk about the biases, the examples, and it will become much more clear and much more understandable.
Yeah, no, I wanted to actually, just push you on this in terms of, you said that, we like to emulate what others have done, or basically, success stories or models of success, and we try and emulate them. But there's also this, idea that, which is always in the back of our mind, that, this might be a shortcut, this might be a quick fix to something that we want to achieve or, sort of acquire in terms of knowledge. So do you see any, what do you call as any, say leanings or biases that try to push back against this tendency, right? So you spoke about the high accuracy, but in many cases, it may not be the most accurate way of, say, emulating a person. Because, let's say, for instance, if you're trying to emulate cricketer, that cricketer may have practice in very different circumstances, very different sort of context to the one that you're in, right? So it may not be highly accurate in being able to emulate them. So what has been the pushback against these tendencies among humans?
Yeah, so there's one more sort of like a trigger, one more bias, one more sort of a tendency that we try to emulate people that we see as being similar to ourselves. So, for instance, I'll see somebody who was maybe my batchmate and now is a maybe a very successful businessman. My chances of trying to emulate him, the chances of me like fixating and trying to emulate him is much more than trying to emulate maybe somebody sitting somewhere in Europe. So I try to, humans try, not I, but generally everybody, we try to see and look for people who were in similar circumstances or who with whom we can associate. So that is why people want sort of, for instance, women want women at higher levels, women want a women president. But even though the women president may or may not enact women friendly policies or may not push for women friendly policies and governance, but women tend to associate with her more. And because of this association, they have that familiarity and now the tendency to emulate, the tendency to look upon a highly successful person, and when you also see that they are very similar to who you are, so the sort of the thinking that this may not be a correct way because maybe they are very dissimilar to me, I don't know what they did, that tends to sort of cool down. So you also, that is why representation at certain times and certain levels matter. So that inspiration thing, this boils down to this. You were inspired by seeing a senior scientist from your village sitting at ISRO. So then you are much more likely to try to emulate them.
Got it. So you're looking at a few biases in this context. So you want to give us a rundown of what those biases are and what they mean in specific context?
So biases, there is a lot of like flowcharty division. So first we have content and context biases. I'll use examples. Tell me anytime I go down that rabbit hole and not understandable. So content biases, these are sort of direct biases. For instance, maybe I look at you and see that you break a coconut and that leads to you break a coconut maybe every day before you open your shop and your shop is highly successful. So I'll look at that breaking of coconut, and what I'll do is when I'll sow my crops, I'll also break the coconut, and now I'm associating that certain ritual, the content of the ritual with success. So I'm thinking that because you break a coconut and that breaking of coconut is leading to your shop being very successful, I'll also break a coconut before I sow my crops. So my crops will also be like very a good crop, a bountiful crop.
There's a causal, you try to ascribe a
Yeah,
causal
and
relation.
I'm not trying to sort of see the context. I'm just seeing that, oh, you are breaking a coconut. Oh, so this is the basic sort of the premise for a lot of rituals. This is a premise for a lot of rituals. You do some kind of rituals before you do a sort of a, I don't know what you call that in, it's called a shubh kam. I don't know what you call that in English. You do an auspicious.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
might be wrong here, but is it?
Yeah,
So
do a
good.
auspicious
Yeah.
thing. So you have certain rituals that is based on this content bias. So you try to see that, oh, other people, I did this when I was doing X and that X was very successful. So I'll also do this when I do the Y, and Y will also be very successful.
Got
The
it.
next is context biases. Context biases, I have a very nice example. This I tend to use anywhere. So, sort of a new PhD candidate joins a department and she is aiming for tenure. Okay, so you have entered the department. What do you do when you are aiming for tenure? You look at your seniors and see whom should you learn from your tenured seniors to achieve your goal of getting tenure. So, and you also want to collect this information at the lowest cost possible. For the first bias out of context bias, these are indirect biases. We have prestige. So you will see that how other people behave towards that certain individual. And if people are behaving very nicely and giving respect, for the lack of a better word, respect to a person, and everybody is doing that, so you will see that this person is very, he has the prestige, and you will try to emulate that. But you, now you want to go a step further and you want to spend more energy to get more accurate information. So for all the people you found in this, for all the list you made, you will now look, you will pull everybody's CV and count their publications and divide this by the years since maybe PhD. So this will give you a rough measure of success. So this is success bias. First we had prestige. Prestige was, you looked at how people behaved with that person. Second is success. You saw that how many publications they made per year. But now you decide that tenure is super important for you. You want to get the most accurate information you can get, even if it takes you a lot of time, resources, that is at a high cost. So you look at the people who are sort of high ranking in prestige and success, and you pull out all their papers and you read their papers, and then you first see that who has a style similar to yours and similar topics, similar interests similar to yours, and then you see who is the best sort of the researcher or professor in that department. So this is the skill bias. So you first looked at prestige at a low cost, then you looked at success at a medium cost, and then you looked at skill at a high cost. So this is context bias. And because she wanted tenure and she was willing to spend a lot of resources and time, she went for the skill bias and then she found the person. So after she did all this, she was now able to start imitating the person she found to be like the topmost ranked according to her assessment, after spending resources and getting sort of the most accurate information possible.
Yeah, no, this is quite interesting. Harshit, let's take a short break and come back and maybe talk about the other biases in the
Sure.
context of your research. Hi, we're back from that short break. Harshit,
Yeah.
over to you.
So I really like at least this concept, these concepts. I like all the concepts, but these especially I like from what we have been trying to extract. And in this series, we have the last series of biases is conformity bias, the tendency of you to conform to something, conform to societal norms, conform to everything what happens, conform to whatever basically the rules the people have said, conform to culture. So there are basically two types. One is informational conformity, second is normative conformity. Informational is when people are actually altering their private opinion and beliefs about something. For instance, I believe I have seen you do something and now I believe that this is the good way or correct way to do it and I'll do that. The second is normative conformity. I'll do this. I won't change my internal beliefs, but I'll change my behavior because I don't want to face the repercussions or appear deviant from what the others are doing. For this, I have a very nice example which is fun. So assume that from there are 10 people at Takshashila and 8 of them use MacBooks. Okay. And Carl, you join and you walk in and you have a Windows laptop. Okay, and you see that everyone is has a MacBook, and you talk to everyone, and because of costly information and everything else, you gather information that MacBooks have a performance advantage over others, over your Windows laptop, so you buy a MacBook. Okay, this is informational conformity. Your internal views have changed about MacBooks. You had a Windows laptop before this. You came at Takshashila, you saw that maximum people were using MacBooks. So you talked to them and then you came to know that this is a better way. Okay. Then the same situation, but you find out that MacBooks don't have any advantage over your current machine. So, Carl, what will you do now?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think, yeah, I would still buy the MacBook, right? Because you don't want to appear different from the
Oh,
rest of the
so
lot.
you will be normative. to the group. Yeah,
Yeah,
I had not.
yeah, it may not have an intrinsic advantage as far as I'm concerned, but the sheer fact that other people have a MacBook might just
Yeah,
induce a
so
decision
I
to buy a
had
MacBook.
not thought that, Carl, you are so meek and so amicable to societal pressure. That is all right. Yeah, so this is first was the informational conformity. Second is normative conformity. What we started was with learning biases, which are content and context. Context, maybe had success, prestige biases. Then we have conformity biases. Conformity biases are also sort of like the part of context biases. Conformity biases has two parts: informational and normative conformity. And one more example that I like to give is India's successful polio eradication, the ad campaign of polio. So the government chose Amitabh Bachchan. Amitabh Bachchan, if you think very logically, if you are running a polio campaign, you would want somebody. If you don't know about this and you don't take societal considerations into consideration, you will think that you want maybe the head of India's polio program, or maybe a very renowned scientist working on, or a researcher working on polio, to be the face. But if you know about how the society works and how culture works, Amitabh Bachchan was a very good choice, because people have these biases and they look at him and they say that, so this is a very successful person and he is promoting this and he is doing this. So you think that first this gives legitimacy to the polio campaign and the polio vaccine also. And also, people now have this subconscious bias, the biases we talked about. They see that he is very successful and we should, but this is all subconscious, okay? We should try to emulate what he's doing, or we should emulate what he's doing because he's very successful, and we can also become successful by doing sort of what he does or what he promotes, or this is how you become successful. So, not a very sort of logical choice if you don't take everything else into consideration, but he was a very successful choice because of all these biases.
Wow, that was actually one of the more sort of interesting examples in the context of these learning biases. Do you have any recommendations for books or references that people can? Of course, I mean your newsletter is one that people should sort of refer to. But are there any sort of authors or folks that you have read about who work on these topics
Yeah,
that you
so
would want to give a shout out?
this sort of best, this is explained best in Joe Henrich's book called Why Humans Cooperate. So it's a good book. You can go read it. And a lot of our work is based on people like Joe Henrich. And yeah, so they are like doing very well in the field and they have been very helpful for our research.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, just before we leave, just wanted to tell our listeners that Takshashila Institution's one-year program, the postgraduate program, public policy, the applications are open. So, if you're interested, or if anyone who you know is looking to do a course like ours on public policy, please let them know, and they can head on over to school.takshashila.org.in and find the requisite details to apply. So thanks, Harshit. This was quite an interesting and absorbing episode. So where can people subscribe to
Yeah,
your
so it's
newsletter?
at Substack called Insight from Biology.
Great. Thanks to everyone for listening to another episode of ATP. We'll be back with more episodes very soon.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks
Thanks,
for having
Harshit,
me.
and see you all soon.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.